Students, hi. All right, Instructor Robertson here. Chapter 2 from the textbook. So chapter 1, hopefully you will look through that chapter 1 video. And I wanted to break these up so that it was a little bit less overwhelming. There's a lot of material from these chapters. Now, again, I will reach out and say that Tuesdays and Thursdays I am on campus. Make sure that you are getting all the week 1 items done. Reading chapters 1 and 2, reviewing the PowerPoint presentation, which you will want to open with this video because I will go through the PowerPoint briefly. So in chapter 2, PowerPoint, when you are looking at chapter 2, we start to talk about thinking like an economist, right? And so there are a few things that we are going to do. Economists have 2 roles, scientists and policy advisors, right? And one of the things that economists do is they employ, we employ the scientific method, right? And this is looking at different theories and what works. So the study of economics is really is just as scientific as any other item that in the science world, right? We use assumptions and models and test those models. And we use models just like you would use things like a roadmap, right? It's not an actual, the roadmap represents the roads. If you've ever used any type of map, right? Even if you use Google Maps, you don't actually have the roads. It's a picture and it tells you where to go. And so when we use models in economics, what we see is that we will use simple things to explain more complex issues, right? But you can still get the feeling in the simplistic way versus in explaining all of the issues, right? And so at least in this principles, in this 102 course, we are just going to use a lot of models. If you've ever had that fake human body kind of thing in your science class, right? Model of the human anatomy. You don't actually have some science classes you actually have a human body to study, right? A cadaver. But often it's just a very simplistic plastic model, right? Anytime that we use a model airplanes. If you go to the dentist and you see that like model, they have like a set of teeth sitting there. It's not a whole body and everything real. It's just like a fake set of plaster teeth, right? And so these types of items, models are okay. We still get the gist of things. Model trains, right? We can still see what a train looks like without having a whole train. And so those items are important. So make sure that you look at this idea of the circular flow diagram, that we have households and firms, right? And so there are a couple different things happen when you look at the circular flow diagram. And, we look at this idea of the households. They own the factors of production, right? They are the ones that really give their time, their labor to firms, right? But they have 2 things that they do. They also buy and consume goods from other firms. And so they offer 2 different things, and firms do 2 different things. They either buy or they hire folks from households, right, and give them money for that, or they sell goods and services to households. And you'll see that in the diagram in figure 1 on slide 12, that there are a lot of different things happening. So when you go somewhere to purchase something, a lot of different things happened, right? You had to earn money from somewhere that gave you the money so you could take that money and go somewhere else and buy their items, and then that money is used to pay their employees or pay for their other factors of production. So that is an important component. Now, circular flow diagram. The second thing that's important from chapter 2 is this idea of a PPF, or production possibility frontier. And when you scroll through this and you read about it in the text, the example that's given here is this idea of computers and wheat. And so what we see in the PPF, this idea of computers and wheat, is we come up with a country that makes only 2 items. They make computers, the country does, and we're on slide 15, and they make wheat. And so make sure that you have your slides up when you are going through these videos, especially, I guess, really for all of the chapters, because you're going to want my narration and go through your slides. So have my video playing and go through your slides briefly, and you can pause the video when you need to. Okay, so we have an X and Y axis of wheat and computers. And one of the things about the PPF is that what you'll see is the one item is on one side and one is on the other. One's on the x-axis and one is on the y-axis. And what do we know about production? Well, we know that there's a finite amount of things we can produce, right? And so if all we want to do is produce computers, we're not going to be able to, with a given amount of labor, if we use all that labor to produce computers, we're not going to be able to produce any wheat. And so if we want to produce a little bit of wheat, we're going to have to take some of our production ability away from computer building and move it to wheat, meaning like labor and funds, resources, right? And if we want more wheat, we got to take more away from computers. And so you will see a little schedule there of production on slide 15. And so what will happen then is some examples, right? You will look through these couple different slides and you will say, okay, you will plot some different things. There's a active learning. So you will plot a couple different things on F, point F, 100. So hopefully you can see these. I'm not sure why they're not coming up. Oh, they're not coming up in PowerPoint mode, are they? Just double checking your PowerPoints. I wonder why they're all coming up a little bit blank. All right. I'm not sure if they're coming up blank because, oh, I know why. You're going to have to download these PowerPoints. They're not going to come up. If you look at them on the internet, they come up as a PDF. And when they come up as a PDF, they're not going to have, there you go. They're not going to have your graphs. The graphs only show up when you open it in PowerPoint. So I'm glad that we're doing this, or that I'm looking through these as I'm talking to you. Okay, so you're going to have to do the plot all of these, or look at the plots on a PowerPoint when there's graphs. And this course has a lot about graphing. All right, so if you look at slide 16, we talk about a point F, which is a point that graphs 100 computers and 3,000 tons of wheat, and it's under the PPF. That means that we're not actually, it's possible but not efficient, right? We want to be on the line. That is the important component. And on slide 17, you'll see point G, which is 300 computers. If I gave you this number and 3,500 tons of wheat, it's outside of the production possibility frontier. So it is not possible, right? So those are two other things that are important. Anything on the production possibility frontier from our schedule back in slide 14, A, B, C, D, E, F, all those points, that is the literal frontier, right? And then anything that is outside of that on the other side to the right of that line, not possible, right? With our current level of production. And anything under it is just simply not efficient. All right, so I'm going to scroll through. All right, so opportunity cost, you'll remember that that's a principle, right? That you have to give something up to get something. And so the way that you look at movement on this production possibility frontier is through slope. And slope is rise over run. And so, for example, for some of you that haven't had slope in a while, in slide 20, you are going to, the example given there is going from 5,000 tons of wheat to 4,000. So you're going to have a slope of minus 10, right? That is really what the angle is, slope of minus 10, the rise over the run. So the rise, it goes down 1,000. The run, it goes from 0 to 100. So you see that, right? So it's a minus 10 slope. Minus meaning going down. But really, that's how this whole production possibility frontier is designed. It's a bunch of slope. The slope is a connection of a bunch of points, right? But the steepness of the slope is critical. So if you look at slide 21, you will see in which country is the opportunity cost of cloth lower. And what we see then is that opportunity costs mean, the lower the opportunity cost means you give less up, right? It's a cost, right? So some countries that are really, really good at making wine, right? For them to give up making wine to make a little bit of cloth, they give up a lot of wine. Places that aren't as good at making wine, when they give up wine making, they might not give that, they aren't even making that much wine. So when they have to give up some production, they might be better at making cloth. So a couple people moving away from working on bottling wine and they move to making cloth, they might add a ton to cloth, right? So you're not giving much up. The opportunity cost, a low opportunity cost means you're not giving much up in order to make something else, right? So that's the idea of opportunity cost. And so when we see the lower opportunity costs, we see in the example that England with the flatter, it's not as steep, so the flatter slope means that they gave up less, right? And so in chapter 2, we talk a little bit about this idea of a steepness of slope. So make sure that you are going through the chapter and kind of understanding, reading thoroughly what that actually means. Remember, the PowerPoint are just a synopsis or summary of the chapter. All right. An economic shift is if something happens and there's growth, then you can produce more at all levels, right? So that is a shift, economic growth, and a PPF, production possibility frontier. Even though we showed it was a straight line in most of our examples, in reality, it's actually a curved line, right? And now we are getting into this idea of trade-offs, right? And the idea that it's, from a function standpoint, which some of you haven't had functions yet, what we see is that trade-offs depending on where they are. So if you think about it from the sense that if you have certain people that are really good at making beer, if we have beer and mountain bikes, right? And some people maybe aren't as good. And so what we see is that the first people that we take from making beer are the people that aren't as good, right? So the opportunity cost is lower. They weren't making much beer anyway. We might as well move them to mountain bikes, right? And theoretically speaking. But then as we get into the people that are actually really good at beer, it's kind of like when we think about sports, right? Think about basketball. We just had March Madness. And you have your first string players, your first 5 that go out there, right? Maybe they each score 20 points on average. And so you have 100 points, right? And so there is how many you score on average. And you might have other people on the bench that are okay, right? But if you have one of your main 5 starters, when you pull one of them out, you lose maybe 20 points, right? Or one of them gets hurt. It's a bigger issue than maybe a third string person. Nothing against the third string person getting hurt. But if they get hurt, maybe they only score an average of 1 point a game. You're not actually taking away from the overall game as much if the third string player gets hurt versus if a first string player gets hurt. From winning the game, it's going to have less of an impact. So that's how we think about it. We think that there are different ways of divvying up production. And when we do that, we do it with a curved line. When we show, so when you're looking at these curved lines, that's how you will, there's different slopes at different levels, right? And so think about it like that. Your first stringers are going to have a bigger impact from an opportunity cost standpoint than your third string. And so that really is all the way through. Let's see, slide 29. Slide 30, we talk a little bit about micro and macro. And micro is a study of how households and firms make decisions, whereas macro is the study of economy-wide phenomena, right? Inflation, unemployment, economic growth, and really a collection of all of the individual firms and how they are interacting. Another takeaway from chapter 2 is this idea of positive statements versus normative statements. And I have students all of the time that confuse the two. And positive statements are, we can positively identify this statement, so meaning we're attempting to describe the world as it is, right? Normative, we're trying to somehow make it seem normal, right? We're trying to say how it should be. But remember, positive statements, like you can positively identify the statement, right? You can confirm it. So positive means you can confirm it. Whereas normative is a suggestion, right? Positive, you can confirm it. Normative, suggestion. There's a few questions there for you to go through. Some of the items as to why economists disagree, right? They do. They disagree about how things, which you think it's a science, how do they disagree, right? 2 + 2 is 4. Gravity is this amount of pressure being put on us, right? So they do disagree, though. So when we're thinking like an economist, we have to be careful. So these numbers tell us a little bit that there are certain things that most economists agree on. Ceiling on rents reduces the quantity and quality of households. 93% of economists agree on that. Import quotas reduce economic welfare. There are certain things that the numbers just don't lie, right? And there are other things that some economists are on the fence about. They don't all agree, right? For whatever reason, not to confuse you. So look through those, and then it gives you a percentage of how many, roughly, economists agree on those topics. And then there's some examples of folks here that study economics, and lots of business owners do, lots of individuals, lots of investors, definitely lots of investors study what's happening with the economy. And really, in my mind, because I love microeconomics, almost everyone should study it so you understand shifts and you understand cycles, right? So that's chapter 2. So I'm hoping, I don't know, I might have to figure out how to do more of a voiceover situation with these PowerPoints for this. I will also post a video that talks a little bit about opportunity costs separate from my videos so that you have that as well. So that is chapter 2. I know there's a chapter 1 video. Make sure you watch that. And there is also, make sure you do the homework. If you have homework issues, reach out to me this first week. We need to make a plan for everybody to be able to do their homework and get it to me, and so that I can review it. If you have questions, please let me know. 814-490-6473. I am on campus. If you need individual attention relating to this course or other business courses, please let me know. Make an appointment so I know you're coming, right? But I am there. A lot of times I'll be there at like noon on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 o'clock. I can also meet with you at a designated time on campus. Even in the East Campus, I'm over there, SBEC, in the mornings. So just let me know. I'm not an ogre, right? So welcome all to microeconomics, and you now have all 3 videos for week 1.